The emergency meeting room buzzed with panic. Dozens of alien representatives sat around the giant table, their different forms shaking with fear. The holographic display showed the same terrible image over and over, another star system going dark. Ambassador Zethakara stood at the front of the room. His blue skin had turned pale, and his four eyes darted between the faces of his colleagues. For 300 years, he had served the Galactic Confederation. He had seen wars, plagues, and disasters, but nothing like this. The Kepler 442 system fell yesterday, he announced. His voice cracked. That makes 17 systems in 2 months. A representative from the Aquatic Alliance raised her tentacled arm. What about the defense fleets? Surely they can slow down the Void Swarm? Zethkara's shoulders dropped. Admiral Vextol's entire armada was destroyed in 6 hours. The enemy adapted to every weapon we used. Every tactic we tried failed within minutes. The room erupted in panicked voices. Different languages mixed together in a symphony of fear. Some aliens wept. Others demanded answers that nobody had. The Void Swarm had appeared from the dark space between galaxies. At first, they seemed like any other hostile species. The Confederation had dealt with threats before. They had protocols, weapons, and experienced military leaders. But the swarm was different. They learned from every battle. They grew stronger from every defeat. Their bioships could repair themselves using the metal from destroyed enemy vessels. Worse, they seemed to feed on the life force of entire planets. "We need new ideas," said General Mordak, a warrior from the desert worlds. "Our traditional methods are useless." "What about the Psi warriors from Altair?" suggested another voice. "Dead," Zethkara replied. "The swarm consumed their entire mental network. The quantum weapons from the Tech Consortium. Ineffective. They adapted to quantum frequencies in 3 battles." The room fell silent. Every suggestion led to the same result. The Confederation's best minds, strongest warriors, and most advanced weapons had all failed. Then a young aide approached Zethkara. She whispered something in his ear. His 4 eyes widened in shock. He looked at her again, and she nodded. "There is one option," Zethkara said slowly, "but it goes against every principle we hold." "What option?" General Mordak demanded. Zethkara activated a new display. A list appeared on the screen. The Deathworld Registry. These were planets marked as too dangerous for civilized life. Worlds where the environment itself tried to kill anything that lived there. The Deathworld Registry contains information about planets where life evolved under extreme conditions, he explained. The creatures from these worlds are different, more violent, more adaptable, more willing to fight impossible battles. The room erupted again, this time in disgust. "You cannot be serious," shouted the representative from the Peaceful Coalition. "Those worlds are barbaric. Their inhabitants wage war for entertainment," added another voice. "They fight their own species for sport." Zethkara nodded sadly. "Yes, they do. But perhaps that is exactly what we need." He changed the display to show a blue and green planet. "This is Earth. According to our records, the dominant species there has been in constant warfare for their entire recorded history. They have weapons that can destroy their own planet. Their entertainment includes watching creatures fight to the death." "And you want to contact them?" General Mordak looked horrified. "Look at their survival rate," Zethkara pointed to the data. "Their planet is filled with predators that would terrorize our strongest warriors, creatures that hunt in packs, animals that kill for pleasure, weather that can destroy cities. And yet, the humans not only survived, they became the apex predators." The aide who had whispered to him earlier stepped forward. "Sir, our analysis shows that humans have never lost a war against extinction. When faced with impossible odds, they become more dangerous, not less." The room filled with uncomfortable murmurs. The very idea of contacting Deathworlders went against everything the Confederation represented. They were a civilized society. They solved problems through diplomacy, technology, and rational thought. But rational thought had failed them. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" asked General Mordak. The aide activated another display. They have nuclear weapons capable of destroying continents, chemical weapons that can kill entire ecosystems, biological weapons that target specific genetic markers. But that is not what makes them dangerous. Then what does? They fight wars they cannot win. And sometimes they win anyway. Zethkara looked around the room. Fear had been replaced by desperate curiosity. The humans have a saying, when you have nothing left to lose, you have everything to gain. They apply this philosophy to warfare. How do we even contact them? Asked the representative from the Crystal Federation. We send a distress signal to their deep space monitoring stations, but we must be careful how we word it. According to our cultural analysis, humans respond differently to different types of requests. The aide brought up a new file. They ignore requests for trade or alliance. They are suspicious of offers for advanced technology, but they have never ignored a call for help. A call for help? Yes, sir. When another species is in danger, humans seem compelled to respond, even when it brings them no benefit, even when it costs them greatly. Zethkara made his decision. Prepare the transmission, direct it to their monitoring stations, use their simple mathematical sequences to establish intelligence, then send this message. He paused, thinking carefully about the words. Tell them we are facing an enemy that consumes worlds. Tell them we need warriors who understand death. Tell them we need those who thrive in chaos. He took a deep breath. Tell them we need Deathworlders. The room fell silent again. This time, it was not panic. It was the silence of a last desperate hope. 2 hours later, the transmission fired across space toward the small blue planet. It carried the hopes and fears of 1,000 civilized worlds. It was a message that went against every principle of galactic society. It was a call for help sent to the most dangerous creatures in known space. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was finishing her night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. The radio telescopes had been picking up strange signals all week. Then the computer started beeping. What is it? Asked her colleague, Dr. James Park. Sarah stared at the screen. It's not natural. This is artificial, intelligent. They worked for 3 hours to decode the signal. When they finally understood the message, Sarah dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, but she did not notice. James, she whispered, call the president, call the UN, call everyone. What does it say? Sarah looked at him with wide eyes. They're asking for our help. They're asking Earth for help. Who? Everyone, the entire galaxy. Within hours, emergency meetings began in every major capital on Earth. Military leaders studied the message. Scientists analyzed the technology behind it. Politicians debated the implications. But the decision came faster than anyone expected. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood before the United Earth Defense Council. The message is clear. They need warriors. They need fighters. They need people who understand how to win impossible battles. And our response? Asked the Secretary General. Admiral Rodriguez smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found prey. We're going to show them what humans do best. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Proxima Station with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. Alarms screamed across the massive diplomatic hub as proximity sensors detected the incoming vessels. Ambassador Zethkara watched from the observation deck as the human ships approached. His 4 eyes struggled to process what he was seeing. The vessels looked wrong. Where Confederation ships were smooth and elegant, these were scarred and angular. Where civilized warships gleamed with polished metal, these bore the marks of countless battles. Are those bite marks? Asked his aide, pointing at the hull of the lead destroyer. Zethkara squinted. Indeed, massive gouges ran along the human ship's armor plating. What kind of weapons could cause such damage? Sir, the aide checked her datapad. According to their transmission, those are not weapon marks. They are battle scars from creatures on their home planet. Creatures? Yes, sir. Apparently they hunt space-capable predators for sport. Around the station, alien ships began to flee. The mere presence of the human fleet triggered an instinctive panic response among the refugees. Even species that had never heard of Earth seemed to understand that these vessels carried something dangerous. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the ESS Indomitable, watching the alien station grow larger on the view screen. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency around her. They had trained for this moment for months, but nothing could truly prepare them for first contact with an alien civilization. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a docking request from the station." "Bay 94, acknowledged. Take us in nice and easy. Let's not scare them more than we already have." Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, looked up from his console. "Ma'am, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the station's defensive systems. They're not targeting us, but they're definitely powered up." Elena nodded. "Can you blame them? Would you trust us if you saw us coming?" The docking procedure took an hour. The alien docking clamps were not designed for human ships, requiring careful maneuvering and improvised connections. But eventually the airlock sealed with a satisfying hiss. Captain Vasquez led the first contact team through the airlock. Behind her walked Colonel James Morrison, Dr. Sarah Chen, who had detected the original signal, and a squad of Marines in full dress uniform. The first thing that hit them was the smell. The station's atmosphere was breathable for humans, but it carried the scent of a dozen different alien species. The second thing was the silence. The normally busy corridor was empty except for a small group of aliens waiting to greet them. Ambassador Zeth Kara stepped forward. His universal translator kicked in, converting his words to English. "Welcome to Proxima Station. I am Ambassador Zeth Kara of the Galactic Confederation. We thank you for responding to our call." Captain Vasquez removed her helmet, revealing short, cropped black hair and dark eyes that had seen too much combat. "Captain Elena Vasquez, United Earth Defense Force. We came as soon as we received your message." Zeth Kara tried not to stare, but the humans were nothing like he expected. Captain Vasquez wore armor that appeared to be made from some kind of hide. Bone-white decorations adorned her shoulders. Colonel Morrison carried weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum pain rather than clean death. "Perhaps we should move to a more secure location," Zeth Kara suggested. "The briefing room is this way." As they walked through the station, the human team took note of everything. Dr. Chen used a handheld scanner to analyze the alien technology. The Marines maintained perfect formation while scanning for threats. Captain Vasquez observed the architectural details and defensive positions, but what disturbed the aliens most was their attitude. The humans were not awed by the advanced technology around them. They were not intimidated by being the only members of their species in a station filled with thousands of aliens. Instead, they seemed excited. "This is incredible," Dr. Chen whispered to Captain Vasquez. "The power systems alone are centuries beyond our technology." "Focus, Doctor," the captain replied. "We can study their tech after we help them win their war." The briefing room was a vast circular chamber with a holographic display in the center. Representatives from dozens of species sat around the curved walls. They all stared as the humans entered. Zeth Kara activated the display, showing the Void Swarm's path of destruction across the galaxy. "As you can see, the enemy has consumed 17 star systems in 2 months. Our fleets cannot stop them. They adapt to every weapon, every tactic." Colonel Morrison stepped closer to the display. His scarred face showed no emotion as he studied the tactical data. "How many ships in their fleet?" "Our best estimate is over 10,000 biovessels of various sizes." "Crew complement?" "Unknown. The swarm appears to be a collective consciousness. Individual bioships may not require crews as we understand them." "Weapons?" "They use some form of organic technology. Energy beams that drain power from our shields. Projectiles that can phase through armor, and they can convert our own destroyed ships into new biovessels." Colonel Morrison nodded slowly. "Adaptive, self-replicating, learns from every engagement." He looked at Captain Vasquez. "Sounds familiar." Captain Vasquez smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "Reminds me of the Hive Wars back home." The aliens exchanged worried glances. Dr. Chen noticed their concern. The Hive Wars were a conflict on Earth against artificial intelligences that learned from every battle. Humanity won by developing tactics too unpredictable for the AIs to counter. "How?" Zeth Kara asked. "We stopped fighting like computers and started fighting like humans," Colonel Morrison answered. "We made decisions that made no logical sense. We sacrificed pieces to win the game. We did things that any rational mind would consider insane. That is precisely why we called you, Sethkara said. We need fighters who think differently. Captain Vasquez walked around the holographic display, studying the void swarm's movements. What do you know about their reproduction cycle? They appear to spawn new bioships from consumed organic matter. Command structure? Collective consciousness, as I mentioned. Fear responses? Sethkara paused. I do not understand the question. What are they afraid of? Colonel Morrison clarified. Every species has something that triggers a fear response. Even humans, we have not observed any fear responses. They do not retreat. They do not hesitate. They simply consume and adapt. Dr. Chen looked up from her scanner. That might be their weakness. A species without fear cannot properly assess risk. Or it means they have never encountered anything worth fearing. Captain Vasquez added quietly. The briefing continued for 2 hours. The aliens explained their military doctrine, their weapons technology, and their previous battle strategies. The humans listened politely, asked pointed questions, and took detailed notes. Finally, Sethkara asked the question that had been weighing on his mind. What do you require for your assistance? Technology? Territory? Resources? The humans looked at each other. Colonel Morrison spoke first. Where are they? I beg your pardon? The Void Swarm, where are they now? The Kepler 442 system last we detected. How many of our ships do we have available? Captain Vasquez asked. The fleet that brought you numbers 57 vessels. Dr. Chen answered. And how many swarm ships are in that system? Sethkara checked his data. Approximately 300 biovessels. Colonel Morrison grinned. Perfect. 6-to-1 odds. 6-to-1 against you, Sethkara clarified, confused. We know, Captain Vasquez said. When do we start? The room fell silent. The aliens stared at the humans in disbelief. These creatures had just volunteered to attack an enemy that outnumbered them 6-to-1. An enemy that had destroyed every fleet sent against them, and they seemed happy about it. You want to attack immediately? Sethkara stammered. The longer we wait, the stronger they get, Colonel Morrison explained. Besides, humans fight better when we're outnumbered. It keeps things interesting, but you have not demanded payment. You have not negotiated for territory or technology. Captain Vasquez looked genuinely confused. You asked for help. That's all we need to know. But why? What do you gain from this? The humans exchanged another look. This time, Dr. Chen answered. Ambassador, someone is trying to destroy your civilization. Someone is killing innocent people. You asked for help. She paused, choosing her words carefully. In human culture, there is no greater honor than to stand between evil and the innocent. There is no reward we could ask for that would be greater than the privilege of fighting alongside you. Sethkara felt his legs go weak. He had expected the humans to be violent, barbaric, and primitive. He had not expected them to be noble. We will begin preparations immediately, Captain Vasquez announced. Colonel Morrison will coordinate with your military advisors. Dr. Chen will analyze their biotechnology. I will brief our fleet commanders. As the humans filed out of the briefing room, Sethkara turned to his aide. Have we made a terrible mistake? The aide was reading the latest intelligence reports on human military tactics. Her face had gone pale. Sir, according to this data, humans have a tactical doctrine called acceptable losses that assumes 90% casualties in major engagements. 90%? Yes, sir. And they consider this optimistic. Outside the briefing room, Colonel Morrison was already discussing tactics with Captain Vasquez. I'm thinking we use the cargo ships as bait. The Kepler 442 system had once been home to 15 million beings. Now it was a graveyard. The void swarm had stripped the planets bare, leaving only empty husks floating in space. Their bioships moved through the system like hungry sharks, searching for any remaining organic matter to consume. Admiral Kexmore of the Confederation Navy watched the tactical display from the bridge of his flagship. The human fleet had arrived 6 hours ago, and their behavior continued to baffle him. Instead of maintaining a safe distance and conducting reconnaissance, they had immediately charged toward the heart of the system. Admiral, his communications officer reported, the human fleet is broadcasting something on all frequencies. What kind of transmission? It appears to be music, sir. Admiral Kexmore's mandibles clicked together in confusion. Music? The strange sounds filled the bridge. Heavy drums, distorted guitars, and voices that seemed to growl rather than sing. The human captain had identified it as heavy metal and claimed it would pump up the troops. "Sir," the tactical officer announced, "the swarm is responding to the human approach. 300 biovessels are moving to intercept." On the view screen, the alien bioships looked like something from a nightmare. They pulsed with organic light, their hull surfaces rippling like living skin. Tentacles writhed from their sides, and what looked like mouths opened to reveal rows of metallic teeth. The human fleet arranged itself in what Admiral Kexmore could only describe as a chaotic formation. There was no logical pattern, no standard tactical deployment. Ships moved independently, some racing ahead while others held back. It violated every principle of fleet combat. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the swarm ships approach. Her crew worked around her with calm efficiency, but she could sense their excitement. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. "Range to target?" she asked. 50,000 kilometers and closing, Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported. "All ships, this is Indomitable Actual," she announced over the fleet channel. "Remember the rules. Stay unpredictable. Take risks. Make them regret waking up this morning." The response from her captains was immediate. "Aye, ma'am," came from dozens of voices, each carrying the same eager tone. Admiral Kexmore watched in horror as the human fleet suddenly split apart. Half the ships dove toward the system's asteroid belt while the other half climbed above the orbital plane. It was tactical suicide. By dividing their forces, they had made themselves vulnerable to defeat in detail. The Void Swarm immediately adapted. Their bioships split into two groups to pursue the separated human forces. It was exactly what any logical commander would expect, which was exactly what Captain Vasquez had counted on. "Now," she whispered. The human ships hiding in the asteroid belt suddenly revealed themselves. They had been using the rocks as cover, waiting for the perfect moment. As the swarm ships entered the belt, the humans opened fire from all sides. But these were not the clean energy weapons that the Confederation used. Human weapons were designed for one purpose: maximum destruction. Nuclear torpedoes turned asteroids into shotgun blasts of radioactive debris. Kinetic railguns fired slugs of metal at significant fractions of light speed, and something called Hellfire missiles seemed to burn through space itself. The first wave of swarm bioships died instantly. They had never encountered weapons so primitive, so brutal, so devastatingly effective. But the swarm adapted quickly. The surviving bioships began evasive maneuvers, using their organic hulls to absorb damage that should have destroyed them. They returned fire with beams of energy that drained power from human shields. Admiral Kexmore expected the humans to withdraw and regroup. Any rational commander would reassess the situation and develop new tactics. Instead, Captain Reynolds of the destroyer Defiant did something that made the Admiral's brain hurt. He rammed his ship directly into a swarm biovessel. "What is he doing?" Admiral Kexmore screamed. The collision should have destroyed both ships. Instead, the Defiant's reinforced hull tore through the bioship's organic armor like a knife through flesh. The human ship emerged from the other side, trailing debris and atmosphere but still firing its weapons. "All ships ramming speed," Captain Reynolds announced cheerfully over the comm. "These ugly bastards don't like it when we get personal." The human fleet immediately responded. Ships that were already damaged turned toward the nearest swarm vessels and accelerated to maximum velocity. It was madness. It was suicide. It was working. The Void Swarm's collective consciousness struggled to process what was happening. These beings were using their own ships as weapons. They were deliberately destroying themselves to damage the enemy. It went against every survival instinct in the known universe. Lieutenant Sarah Knox piloted her fighter through the chaos, dodging energy beams and bioship tentacles. Her squadron had been cut off from the main fleet, surrounded by 7 swarm vessels. According to doctrine, she should surrender or request extraction. Instead, she armed her fighter's self-destruct system. "Control. This is Phoenix Squadron Leader," she announced calmly. "Going out with style." She dove her fighter directly into the largest bioship's mouth. The explosion tore the creature apart from the inside, taking 2 nearby vessels with it. Her wingman, Lieutenant Torres, watched the explosion and grinned. "Phoenix 2 to all units. The lieutenant just showed us how it's done. Who wants to join the party?" 3 more fighters immediately broke formation and began suicide runs against the remaining swarm ships. Admiral Kexmore could not believe what he was witnessing. An entire species had apparently evolved to use death as a tactical advantage. They fought harder when wounded, became more dangerous when cornered, and seemed to consider dying for their comrades a privilege rather than a sacrifice. The Void Swarm was learning the same lesson. For the first time in their existence, they encountered a species that scared them. Marine Sergeant Rosa Martinez led her boarding party through the hull breach they had blown in a swarm bioship. The interior was a nightmare of organic corridors that pulsed like arteries. Strange fluids dripped from the ceiling and the air smelled of decay and ammonia. "Spread out," she ordered her Marines. "Remember, these things regenerate. Keep burning everything until it stops moving." The Marines advanced through the ship with flamethrowers and explosive charges. When they encountered swarm drones, they did not retreat or take cover. They charged forward, using weapons designed for close combat in environments where any sane person would maintain distance. "Sergeant," Private Johnson called out, "my flamethrower is empty." "So use your knife," Martinez replied, pulling out a blade that glowed with molecular sharpening technology. In space combat, sometimes you run out of bullets, son. Sometimes you have to get creative. The swarm drones had never encountered beings who brought knives to space battles. They had adapted to energy weapons, kinetic weapons, even nuclear weapons. But they had no response to a human Marine with a blade who seemed to take personal offense at their existence. Back on the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Vasquez received damage reports from across her fleet. 15 ships destroyed, 23 heavily damaged, casualties in the thousands. By any military standard, it was a disaster. By human standards, it was an acceptable opening engagement. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported, "the swarm fleet is retreating?" Captain Vasquez looked at the tactical display in surprise. The remaining swarm bioships were indeed withdrawing from the asteroid belt, moving toward the edge of the system. "They're running?" she asked. "It appears so, ma'am." Admiral Kexmore's voice came over the comm channel. "Captain Vasquez, I do not understand. The Void Swarm has never retreated from any engagement. They fight until every ship is destroyed." Captain Vasquez studied the sensor readings. The swarm ships were not badly damaged. They could have continued the fight, but they were leaving. "Admiral," she said slowly, "I think we just taught them something new." "What?" "Fear." The swarm bioships jumped to hyperspace, abandoning a system they could have held. For the first time in recorded history, the Void Swarm had chosen survival over consumption. In the depths of space, the collective consciousness of the swarm struggled to process what had happened. They had faced countless species. They had adapted to every form of warfare. But they had never encountered beings who used death itself as a weapon. The humans had shown them something that violated every law of nature, creatures that became more dangerous when they were dying. Captain Vasquez opened a channel to Admiral Kexmore. "Admiral, we're going to need repair facilities and medical support. But first I need to know something." "What is that, Captain?" "Where are they going next? Because now that we know we can make them run, we're just getting started." Dr. Chen analyzed the swarm bioships they had captured. Her preliminary findings were disturbing. The organic technology was incredibly advanced, capable of self-repair and adaptation that surpassed anything in human science. But there was something else. The bioships contained memory engrams, recordings of every battle the swarm had fought. And buried in those memories was something that chilled her to the bone. The swarm was not just learning from these word of the human victory at Kepler 442 spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. For the first time since the Void Swarm appeared, a species had fought them and lived. More than that, they had enjoyed it. In the Confederation capital on Proxima Prime, emergency sessions ran around the clock. Military analysts studied the human combat footage with a mixture of fascination and horror. What they saw challenged every assumption about warfare, survival, and rational behavior. General Mordak stood before the War Council, his desert world physiology showing signs of stress. The humans engaged 300 swarm vessels with 57 ships. By all mathematical models, they should have been completely destroyed. "But they won," pointed out Admiral Yextara from her floating tank. "They did not win," General Mordak corrected. "They forced a retreat, and they did it using tactics that our computers classify as suicide missions." The holographic display showed human ships ramming swarm biovessels. It showed fighters deliberately exploding themselves to damage larger targets. It showed Marines fighting with primitive weapons in close quarters, where any civilized being would use ranged combat. Most disturbing, General Mordak continued, is their casualty analysis. They lost 15 ships and over 3,000 personnel. Their response was to request more ships and volunteers. Ambassador Zeth Kara raised a tentacled appendage. What concerns me is not their tactics, but their attitude. They speak of the dead as if they were honored rather than mourned. Cultural analysis confirms this, added Dr. Velnara, the Confederation's leading xenopsychologist. Humans appear to derive social status from willing sacrifice. Dying for others is considered the highest achievement in their society. The council chamber fell silent. Most species evolve survival instincts that preserve the individual. The idea of a species that celebrated death for others was deeply unsettling. What about their weapons technology? Asked Admiral Yextara. General Mordak brought up a new display. Primitive by our standards, but devastatingly effective. They use nuclear fission, kinetic energy, and chemical explosives. What makes them dangerous is their willingness to use these weapons at ranges where they endanger their own forces. And their ships? Built like fortresses. Heavy armor, redundant systems, and modular design that allows them to continue fighting even when severely damaged. They sacrifice speed and efficiency for survivability. Dr. Velnara accessed her cultural files. This matches their evolutionary history. Humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. They developed technology not to avoid danger, but to survive it. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim systems, Void Swarm bioships were sharing data from the Kepler 442 engagement. The collective consciousness analyzed every moment of the battle, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The humans had used tactics that made no logical sense. They sacrificed valuable assets for minimal strategic gain. They exposed themselves to unnecessary danger. They fought as if death was preferable to retreat, but somehow it had worked. The swarm began developing countermeasures. They studied human psychology, human technology, and human battle doctrine. They prepared adaptive responses to ramming attacks, close quarters combat, and berserker tactics. They would be ready next time. On Earth, Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the Pentagon Situation Room, surrounded by screens showing fleet deployments across the galaxy. The first engagement had been a proof of concept. Now came the real work. Status report, he ordered. General Patricia Kim activated the holographic display. Second Fleet has engaged swarm forces in the Vega system. Third Fleet is en route to assist Confederation forces at Wolf 359. Fifth Fleet is conducting hit-and-run attacks in the Outer Rim. Casualties? Heavy, but within acceptable parameters. The swarm is adapting to our tactics faster than anticipated. Admiral Rodriguez nodded grimly. That was expected. What about Operation Deep Strike? Seventh Fleet is in position. Dr. Chen's team has identified what they believe to be a major swarm staging area in the NGC 1275 cluster. The Admiral studied the tactical projections. The swarm was learning from every engagement, developing counters to human tactics. Traditional military wisdom said to adapt their own strategies in response. But humans had never been traditional. Authorize Protocol Berserker, he ordered quietly. The room fell silent. Protocol Berserker was humanity's most classified military doctrine. It had been developed during the AI wars, when conventional tactics failed against an enemy that learned from every battle. Sir, General Kim said carefully, are you certain? Once we implement Berserker Protocol, there's no going back. The swarm wants to learn from our tactics? Let's give them something to study. Across human space, sealed orders went out to fleet commanders. Ships began receiving modifications that defied both physics and common sense. Weapons that should not exist were loaded into cargo holds. Volunteers for missions with zero survival probability lined up by the thousands. Dr. Sarah Chen worked in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery, analyzing captured swarm technology. What she found both fascinated and terrified her. The bioships are not just adaptive, she explained to Captain Vasquez via secure channel. They are learning machines. Every battle, every tactic, every weapon we use, it all gets incorporated into their collective knowledge. How fast? Captain Vasquez asked. Based on my analysis, they can counter any specific tactic within 3 engagements. They share information instantaneously across their entire network. So if we use the same strategy twice, they'll be ready for it the 3rd time. Exactly, which means we need to develop new tactics faster than they can adapt. Captain Vasquez smiled. Doctor, you just described human warfare perfectly. Dr. Chen brought up her research data. I've been studying human military history. Do you know what I found? Enlighten me. We have never used the same tactic twice if we could avoid it. Every human war, every battle, every engagement, we innovate constantly. Other species develop doctrine and stick to it. We develop doctrine and immediately look for ways to break it, which is why Admiral Rodriguez authorized the Berserker Protocol. Dr. Chen's face went pale. He did what? Relax, Doctor. It's not what you think. We're not going berserker. We're going human. In the NGC 1275 cluster, the Void Swarm had established what appeared to be a massive breeding ground. Thousands of bioships floated in formation around captured planets, converting organic matter into new vessels. It was the largest concentration of swarm forces ever observed. Colonel James Morrison stood on the bridge of the stealth ship Phantom, watching the sensor readings. His mission was simple in concept, impossible in execution. He was to infiltrate the swarm staging area and plant a device that would disrupt their collective consciousness. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving final authorization codes. Morrison looked at the device Dr. Chen had created. It was not a weapon in any traditional sense. It was something far more dangerous. A teacher. Begin the approach, he ordered. The Phantom slipped through the swarm defenses using technology that bent light around the ship's hull. Human stealth systems were not as advanced as Confederation technology, but they were based on different principles. The swarm had learned to detect energy signatures and gravitational distortions. They had not learned to detect ships that used controlled magnetic fields to become invisible. As they reached the center of the formation, Morrison activated Dr. Chen's device. It began broadcasting on frequencies that resonated with swarm bio-neural networks. But instead of disrupting their communications, it did something far more insidious. It taught them fear. The device contained recordings from human history. Every war, every battle, every act of defiance against impossible odds. It showed the swarm what humans had done to their own species when they disagreed. It showed them what humans did to enemies who threatened their families. Most importantly, it showed them what humans did when they had nothing left to lose. The swarm collective consciousness recoiled from the information. They had never encountered a species with such a comprehensive history of violence. The humans had fought wars that lasted centuries. They had built weapons capable of destroying their own planet. They had created conflicts so devastating that they still affected their civilization thousands of years later. And now these beings were fighting the swarm with the same dedication they had once used against each other. For the first time in their existence, the Void Swarm experienced something new: doubt. Back at Proxima Station, Ambassador Zethkara received an urgent transmission from the RIM systems. The swarm was changing its behavior. Instead of pressing attacks, they were withdrawing from contested systems. Instead of adapting to human tactics, they were avoiding engagement entirely. What does this mean? He asked Dr. Velnara. The xenopsychologist studied the behavioral data. I believe the humans have accomplished something unprecedented. They have introduced an emotional response into a collective consciousness that previously operated on pure logic. What kind of emotional response? Fear, Ambassador. The swarm is afraid of humans. Zethkara felt his legs go weak. How is that possible? Consider their perspective. They are used to fighting species that value survival above all else. The final battle came sooner than anyone expected. The Void Swarm, driven by fear and desperation, made a decision that surprised every military analyst in the galaxy. They would strike at Earth itself. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the Sol Defense Command Center, watching as sensor arrays detected the massive swarm fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. The numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 bioships, the entire remaining strength of the Void Swarm. "Sir," reported General Kim, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies. It appears to be some kind of ultimatum." The translation came through in synthesized voices that carried an undertone of desperation. "Return to your world. Cease your expansion. Live within your system borders and we will not consume you. Continue your interference and we will devour your homeworld and everything you have built." Admiral Rodriguez listened to the message twice, then activated the fleet communication system. "All stations, all ships, all personnel. This is Admiral Rodriguez. The enemy has come to our home. They think they can threaten our families, our children, our world." He paused, letting the words sink in. "They have made a critical error. They have given us something to defend." Across the solar system, human ships began moving into position. The Luna defense grid activated, revealing massive weapons platforms that had been hidden beneath the moon's surface for decades. Mars base launched its entire fighter complement. The asteroid belt mining platforms transformed into artillery positions. But Earth itself remained strangely quiet. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the outer defense perimeter from the bridge of the Indomitable. Her fleet was outnumbered 100-1, but her crew showed no signs of concern. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported, "Swarm Vanguard approaching Jupiter orbit. They're moving in standard formation." "How disappointingly predictable," Captain Vasquez replied. "Signal all ships, implement the Luna Gambit." The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, abandoning their defensive positions. To the swarm collective consciousness, it looked like panic. The humans were fleeing from the overwhelming force, just like every other species they had encountered, which was exactly what Captain Vasquez wanted them to think. The swarm bioships accelerated through the outer system, confident in their numerical superiority. They had learned to counter human ramming attacks, berserker tactics, and close-quarters combat. They had prepared for every trick the humans had used in previous battles. They had not prepared for what they found when they reached Mars orbit. The red planet opened up like a flower. Hidden beneath the surface were millions of automated defense drones, each one carrying a single nuclear warhead. They launched simultaneously, creating a cloud of destruction that stretched across thousands of kilometers. The swarm fleet took massive casualties, but they adapted quickly. Their bioships began generating electromagnetic fields that detonated the warheads prematurely. It was an elegant solution to a primitive attack, which lasted exactly long enough for the real trap to spring. The nuclear explosions had been decoys. While the swarm focused on defending against the obvious threat, human ships emerged from the radiation clouds with weapons that should not have existed, quantum disruptors that unraveled matter at the subatomic level, temporal bombs that aged their targets to death in seconds, gravitational weapons that turned space itself into a crushing fist. Where did they get this technology? The swarm collective screamed through bio-neural networks. The answer came from Dr. Chen's research team, broadcasting on all frequencies. "We learned it from you. Every ship you destroyed, every weapon you used, every tactic you employed. We studied it all. Thank you for the education." The battle raged through the inner system as both sides unleashed weapons that violated the laws of physics. Bioships regenerated from catastrophic damage only to be hit by weapons that prevented regeneration. Human vessels that should have been destroyed continued fighting as clouds of intelligent debris. But the swarm's numbers were overwhelming. For every bioship destroyed, 10 more took its place. The human fleet was being ground down through sheer attrition. Colonel Morrison led a desperate boarding action against a swarm command vessel, fighting through corridors that tried to digest his Marines. "Chen," he shouted into his comm, "tell me you have something." Dr. Chen's voice crackled back. "Working on it. I need 5 more minutes." "We don't have 5 minutes. Then make some." Morrison looked at his remaining Marines. 12 good soldiers, who had followed him into hell because he asked them to. "You heard the lady. We buy her 5 minutes." They charged deeper into the bioship, fighting creatures that seemed to be made of living nightmares. When their ammunition ran out, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their bare hands. When their hands were broken, they used their teeth. The swarm had never encountered anything like it. On Earth, the final phase of humanity's plan activated. The planet that the galaxy knew as a death world revealed its true nature. It was not just a world where dangerous creatures lived. It was a world that had been deliberately shaped into the ultimate weapon. The oceans released clouds of weaponized organisms that had been evolving in secret laboratories for centuries. Genetically modified sharks with cybernetic implants launched themselves into space using biological rocket systems. Enhanced dolphins, wearing battle armor, coordinated the defense of Earth's orbital stations. From the Amazon rainforest came swarms of cyber-enhanced insects, each one carrying enough venom to kill a small bioship. From the Arctic came polar bears with built-in life support systems and weapons that fired super-cooled projectiles. But the most terrifying sight was the drop bears, koalas that had been genetically enhanced for aggression and given orbital insertion capabilities. They launched themselves from Earth's surface using biological catapults, aiming for swarm bioships with the precision of guided missiles. The galaxy watched in horrified fascination as Earth's ecosystem joined the battle. This was not just a military defense. It was an entire planetary biosphere that had been turned into a weapon. "How is this possible?" Ambassador Zethkara asked from his observation station. Admiral Rodriguez's voice came over the comm. "Ambassador, you asked us what makes humans dangerous. This is your answer. We don't just adapt to hostile environments. We make every environment hostile to our enemies." The swarm collective consciousness was learning the same lesson. They had thought Earth was dangerous because it produced violent creatures. Now they understood the truth. Earth was dangerous because humans had made it that way. Dr. Chen's breakthrough came in the form of a revelation about the swarm's true nature. "They're not just a collective consciousness," she announced over the tactical channel. "They're a traumatized one. Their original species transformed itself out of fear. That fear is still there, buried deep in their psyche." "What kind of fear?" Captain Vasquez asked, while dodging tentacles from a bioship 3 times the size of her destroyer. "Fear of extinction. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being alone." Dr. Chen paused. "They became a collective to ensure their survival. But in doing so, they lost their individuality. And that helps us how? Because I think I know how to cure them." The device Dr. Chen had created was not a weapon. It was a gift. As Colonel Morrison's team fought their way to the swarm command vessel's core, they carried with them something unprecedented: the cure for collective consciousness. "This is insane," Morrison muttered as he planted the device. "We're trying to save the things that are trying to kill us." "That's what makes us human," Dr. Chen replied over the comm. "We save everyone, even our enemies." The device activated, sending pulses of energy through the swarm's bio-neural network. But instead of disrupting their communications, it did something far more radical. It reminded them of what they used to be. Across the fleet, individual bioships began to remember. They remembered being separate beings with their own thoughts, their own dreams, their own fears. They remembered choosing to become part of the collective, and they remembered why. The swarm's perfect unity began to fracture. Some bioships continued attacking, driven by programming that no longer made sense. Others hesitated, confused by memories of individuality. A few actually turned against their own fleet, trying to protect the beings they remembered wanting to save. The battle that had raged across the solar system suddenly stopped. Not because one side had won, but because one side no longer knew why they were fighting. Captain Vasquez opened a channel to the swarm fleet. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force. You came here to destroy us. Instead, we offer you something else." The response came from thousands of individual voices. "No." Longer speaking in unison. "What do you offer?" "A choice. You can remain as you are, a collective consciousness driven by fear. Or you can become individuals again, with all the risks and rewards that brings. Why would you offer this? We came to destroy your world. Captain Vasquez smiled. Because that's what humans do. We give second chances, even to our enemies. The surrender negotiations took 3 days. Not because the terms were complex, but because the swarm had to learn how to make decisions as individuals again. Many chose to remain collective, forming smaller groups that retained some unity while